All right, so recently Brendan Schaub did an interview with a smaller YouTuber slash podcaster, and since it's a smaller channel, I'm sure Brendan figured it'd be a safe interview, and the host would just ask him about comedy or the podcasting industry or whatever. So I'm sure Brendan was thrown off when the host opened with a question about Bobby Lee, and then he ended with a question about Theo Vaughn. So I'll give this guy credit. He did his research, and he knows what the people want to hear about. Even though it would have been nice for some follow-up questions, of course Brendan's response was just exactly what you'd expect. But it is a bold move for the interviewer to start off with a question about Bobby Lee, even though it wasn't really a question. He just said, the first thing I have in my notes here is the Bobby Lee controversy. And they just stared at Brendan like he's going to start going off about it. And of course he's just like, this is what you're going to start with? You know, I'm surprised Brendan didn't just walk off and have his brother destroy the tapes or something. You know, for some reason he was there.
Very first thing I had in my notes was the Bobby Lee controversy.
Man, that's how you started.
Dude, I was like, this is the very first thing. I was
I mean, there's not much there, brother. You know, it's like, I love Bobby. You know, it's, good comic. It, stuff happens. You know, shit happens. But
1,000%.
it is what it is. We moved on. You know what I'm saying? But nothing but love for Bobby. Shit happens, man.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Yeah, so Brendan definitely wasn't expecting that, but he just needs to learn to address this stuff better. Like when he did Skankfest a few months ago, that was probably one of his best appearances, and he actually won some people over with that because he actually showed some humility and self-awareness for once, because he admitted that he's not a good enough comedian to perform at Joe Rogan's comedy club. So he should learn from that. Like right here, if he just said, yeah, the whole Bobby Lee thing, I screwed up big time. I should never have done any of that. I feel so bad. I wish I could make it up to him. Anything like that, you know, because then people would be like, damn, maybe he actually learned from the situation and he realizes how badly he screwed up. But instead with this response, just saying, you know, shit happens. I love Bobby Lee, whatever. It just sounds like the same generic response he's been given this whole time. Like when all this initially happened, in the middle of all the Trug Walk drama, Brendan, he was threatening to sue people and Brian was threatening Bobby Lee, and it was just a mess behind the scenes. But of course, when Brendan talks about it, it's like his automated response he has to every controversy or drama or beef. He loves the person, they're best friends, they talk on the phone every day. And I don't think anybody's really buying this to begin with. But then once all the information comes out, then it's like, damn, this guy really just lies through his teeth.
There's no drama. Like Bobby Lee is one of my closest friends. Me and Bobby talk all. No one's been more supportive when I started than Bobby Lee, dude. Me and her are good, man. Dude, when you talk about the secret sauce, Kalila is the secret sauce of Tiger Belly, of the Trash Tuesday. She's such a smart girl. No issues. As far as suing goes, I think it's a miscommunication.
Did you see the clip that they put out? It looked like they were very angry.
Yeah.
Again, and I told her, always come to me.
And just with him complimenting Kalila shows how full of shit he is. And in the beginning there, he could barely even finish his sentence. It's like he's catching himself because he knows how full of shit he is. You know, he's like, me and Bobby are best, or me and Bobby talk all the time, or, you know, there's nothing there. People are trying to act like there's something. And he's always pretending like people are just making stuff up out of nowhere. But nobody needs to, because this shit just writes itself. Like even with Mark Harley, you know, Brendan's former baddie wrangler / handler, when he came out and tried to expose Brendan earlier this year, I was like, you know, maybe some of the stuff he's making up, it just seems like it's too much even for Brendan. Like him peeing in the sink at work, at first I'm like, you know, this can't be true, but then it turns out to be true and I'm proven wrong. And I think pretty much everything Mark has said about Brendan turns out to be true. Like also, he's the first person to talk about the whole Podcast One alleged scam. Like months before everybody's talking about it, he said that Brendan was owed $1.6 million. And originally he thought it was from his agent, but then when somebody mentioned the Podcast One thing, he's like, oh yeah, that's definitely it. So there's no need to make anything up about Brendan. I mean, the guy just attracts drama and controversy. He cannot stay out of it. Even though when he talks about it, he always talks about how much he tries to avoid it and how he doesn't want to be involved in it. But for some reason, he always finds himself in it. And it's because everything he tries to do to avoid it just ends up backfiring and making things 100 times worse. And I don't think Brendan will ever realize that. You know, like with him suing that smaller YouTuber, that was a terrible decision because it didn't do anything. You know, the guy he sued is still making videos about him. And then what Brendan was trying to censor only made people more aware of it. You know, then everybody's making videos about it. You know, Penguin's one of the biggest YouTubers, made a video about it. So that made things so much worse. But of course, Brendan, he learns nothing from it. And then he threatened to sue Kalila and Trash Tuesday. And then they talked about it on their podcast, which just drew more attention to the whole Trug Walk thing. And then also, instead of Brendan just ignoring the fight in the kids subreddit, he hires a team to try to figure out who's running it and have it taken down. And that was probably the worst mistake of them all, because that's how he got Brendan and Brian Callen threatening Bobby Lee. And that's when everything just blew up in his face and he had to go on Tiger Belly to talk about it, which I'm sure was like the worst moment of his life. But I don't know if he'll ever learn from it. Like, he was obviously embarrassed and hated it and everything, but I don't think he ever accepts responsibility or realizes how he screwed up or realized this kind of stuff isn't a good idea. I mean, any rational person from the start could have told him this was not going to end well. I mean, Mark Harley recently said that the guy that Brendan hired, or the team that he hired, the team of hackers to take down the fight in the kids subreddit, like, if you remember when Brendan would talk about this, he was acting like he was having law enforcement look into it, or the FBI was looking into it or something. You know, he acted like he's having this legit team of people going after it. But according to Mark Harley, who again hasn't really made anything up so far, this team that Brendan has was Brian Callen's opener. He says that they paid him $15,000 to try to take down the subreddit, and then he just came back to them and told them it was Bobby Lee behind it all, and they just believed him and they went after him right away. And then obviously that just turned into a disaster. But the fact that Brendan thought this was a good idea, I think it shows he's hopeless. Like, I don't know if he'll ever learn. I mean, he basically just paid this guy 15 grand to make things 1,000 times worse. Like, nothing happened to the fight in the kids subreddit, and this just caused so much more shit for Brendan, and it destroyed his relationship with Bobby and Brian's relationship with Bobby. But I don't know if Brendan even thinks about it like this. You know, he probably just thinks, oh, those trolls on Reddit did all this to me. But it's like, no, dude, you did this all to yourself. Like, one of the most accurate things Joe Rogan's ever said is Brendan Schaub needs a handler. I mean, that is so true. But like Mark Harley said, one of the biggest problems is Brendan's not going to listen to anybody. You know, for some reason, he thinks he's got it all figured out. Like, the past few years have been a disaster. Some would even say the biggest disaster. But still, Brendan, he's got it all under control. He doesn't need any advice. He knows what he's doing with the lawsuits and the threatening and the trying to take down the subreddit. He knows what he's doing. All right, so there's just one more part of this interview I wanted to play when the host asked him about his fallout with Theo Vaughn. And of course, Brendan's reaction is exactly what you'd expect. You know, he's all confused, like, what? People are saying that? You know, me and Theo, we're best friends. We talk on the phone every day. You know, it's the same exact thing you said about Bobby Lee.
And we don't have to talk about it, but the Theo Vaughn, I don't know, I saw a lot of stuff going on social media, which is probably just all...
With me and Theo?
Yeah.
That's one of my best friends.
Everything's Gucci.
We're great.
Social media is crazy.
Yeah. How do you know there was a thing? What's the narrative?
The narrative is that it was a fallout because it was the King and the Sting, and what was it? And then
King the Sting,
yeah.
and then it's the Golden Hour. Right. No, again, this is social media, but it's the Real Housewives of YouTube.
Yeah.
So drama is what gets clicks.
Yeah.
I talked to Theo yesterday. I mean, He's one of my close friends. My kids call him Uncle Theo.
Yeah.
No, the thing there is, so me and Theo started King and Sting together, and then during the pandemic, he moved to Nashville.
Okay.
And he thought he could just zoom in and do both.
Yeah.
And he just couldn't.
Yeah.
He thought he could either zoom in or fly back to LA every week.
Yeah.
And do it. But Nashville's not close, so
yeah.
It was beating him up. He's like, dude, it's too much. We need to find someone to fill in when I'm not there.
Yeah.
Dalia would always fill in.
Yeah.
And eventually he was just like, dude, I can't do it, man.
Yeah.
And his podcast is massive. So he's like, A, I can't do it. B, I don't need to really do it. I just don't have time to keep flying back and forth. He's like, how about we slip Dalia in there and I'll go do my thing. I was like, all right, say less.
Yeah.
That's it, bro.
That's fire.
Yeah, I love Theo. He's like a brother.
Now, would you move to a no income tax state? Like,
absolutely.
Why are you staying in Cali, dude?
And I love that they're just doing this in a hotel lobby. Like, you see some lady walking around in the background. But of course, Brendan, he always just has the same response. You know, if you want people to believe you, you got to change it up a little bit. You can't always just be like, oh, that person, people think we have a beef? No, we're best friends. We talk every single day. I mean, he said the same exact thing about Bobby Lee when him and Brian were threatening him, and there's clearly a lot going on there. So him to use that same response is not the best look, and it makes you question it a little bit. You know, if he just said, me and Theo, we had some problems towards the end, and we're not as close as we used to be, but we're working on things, we're still cool. If he just said that, then I believe him, but instead it's always the same thing. It's like everything's perfect, there are no problems. but nobody's really buying it. And again, he's acting like people are just making stuff up to cause drama, but there's no need to. Like, nobody needs to make anything up when it just all happens. And Brendan's always the common denominator. You know, he can try to put all his problems on other people and be like, oh, it's not my fault, people are just out to get me. But for some reason, this kind of stuff only happens with him. And it seems like there's never any self-reflection, so I don't think he'll ever learn. And also Mark Harley, he had some stuff to say about Brendan's relationship with Theo. And who knows if this is true, but again, Mark Harley so far has been pretty good with this. He claims that on several occasions, Brendan complained to him in private about Theo siphoning off about $5,000 an episode. And I guess Brendan was nervous to bring it up to Theo, but then he finally did. And Theo's basically just like, dude, you're screwing up all the money coming in. You're really bad at business and managing money. And I guess Brendan didn't take it very well. And he wrote off Theo as being mentally ill, difficult to work with, and in the wrong. And Mark adds that he doesn't think Theo stole any money, but he just thinks Brendan's being an idiot who can't do basic math. And he says the false accusations were about $250,000 to $500,000 stolen in total. So there's always something going on behind the scenes with Brendan. You know, it's never like what he makes it out to be. You know, if you just took his word for it, everything's perfect, his career's going well, everything's going according to plan, there's no drama. But in reality, it's just a shit show behind the scenes. But it is very entertaining, you know, I'll give him that. It is like watching reality TV, like he said. And if he was smart, he would start a reality TV show. I mean, that'd be perfect. But of course, he thinks he's above that. And instead, he has some stupid car show, even though he's not even really into cars. And it's getting no views and people are just making fun of it. So he'll just never do anything right. Like, I gave him a lot of good advice in this video. But of course, he's just going to write me off as a hater working at PF Chang's. So he'll never learn, he'll never listen, and he'll never change. So that's about it here. Make sure you guys go check out my Patreon account. There are over, I think, 50 or 60 exclusive videos on there, only available on there, and most of them are over 20 minutes. The next video should be a really good one about the most recent Protect Our Parks episode. There are a lot of good moments from that to talk about. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link in the description. Make sure you check it out. A lot of people say it's worth it. And then hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you at the next video.